Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today we're going to do a fast and loose watercolor landscape demo, and we're going to do it live. I'm going to give it a few minutes for everybody to jump into the chat, and I'm also going to set up my links. So in the meanwhile, if you're watching this at a later date, feel free to jump ahead a few minutes. Chances are it'll take me about 8 minutes to get everything set up. That's just the way it is, and that seems to give people time to get the notifications and to jump in and watch. So if I can get the tabs on my computer to open up, I can get everything else rolling. Why is that not working? Let's restart that. Okay, so while I get my computer restarted, see if there's anything we need to do palette wise. I think we should be pretty good. Are we good light wise? Let's see how that is. There we go. Of course, if y'all have any questions or want to start getting the chat going, let me know, but we'll start in about 8 minutes. For the last demo, we had played around with indigo, burnt umber, and raw umber. Or is it raw? Yeah. What should I do today? Any suggestions on colors you would like to see today? Let's see. Here we go. Channel content. Let's go to our live. I feel like I need an extra table in here for the laptop. What should we put in the description for this one? We are prepping for the art. Hammy, watch out on that cable. For the arts festival season. Okay. View in live control room. All right, we'll be ready in a few minutes. So like I said, if you have any questions, anything you want to throw into the chat, let me know. I want to create a post on Patreon that it's live. We also have this post here. There we go. Pin that up on top. Copy the video link. Video. post that there. I have been sharing stuff on the Ko-fi page, so I'm going to share that there. I have links down below to all the different social media, so if you'd like to check that out and support through any of those ways, feel free. Let's create post something. We're going to do a video. Live painting demo. Live painting demo. Publish now. Okay. Copy the link. Then, last but not least, go over to the Facebook. Facebook.com. Let's see. Live painting demo. Drop in and chat. Feel free to paint along. All right. And very last paste is right here. There we go. All right. Okay, we got somebody in the chat already. Hi, Maddie. How's it going? Believe everything is now set up. I posted some links out there for people to hop in, and if I think the camera setup is good. We are about 8 minutes in, so it seems like that's how long it takes me to get everything rolling. So that being said, in front of me I have a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua, 100% cotton, 140 pound cold press. I use the 100% cotton because I feel like it handles a lot of the kind of scraping, the lifting, the back and forth that goes with watercolor painting. The Stonehenge Aqua is decently priced. I buy the large sheet for a little bit over $4. It went up in price, but everything did. And I break that up into fourths, and I buy it in packs of 10 at a time, 10 or more. There's a whole bunch of companies that put out the 100% cotton paper, and it's kind of up to you to find out which one you like and what price range you like. I played around with Winsor & Newton, and a bunch of other ones. I've used Arches a lot in the beginning, but it was a little too pricey for me. This is what I settled on, and it relaxes really well. After it wants to start buckling, it then smooths out. Let's see. Palette wise, I honestly have no plan whatsoever for this one. It's Sunday evening. I've been trying to shoot to go live for 5 o'clock. Today was kind of a last minute decision to go live, mainly because yesterday I had a farmer's market. last night my friends Chris and Colleen wanted me to come over and visit, so I went over there. And I feel like I did not wash my brush from last time. Oh no. Yeah, looking dirty and stiff. Anyway, so kind of a just tiring weekend, but the work week has had me tired to begin with. Last weekend I slept about 17 hours after I got off of work. Let me grab some fresh water since this brush was not cleaned. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. Alright, so I'm back, and once again I apologize for that. I must have been pretty tired the last time I was painting too. Okay, how's it going, Matthew Clemens? The weekend is coming to an end over here. How are things out in Texas? I'm trying to decide on what palette to use today. Maybe we'll just go with the flow. All right, so I'm going to start off with a little bit of raw sienna. We'll go wet and wet, and we'll use this to outline and prepare our scene. Part of me is leaning towards an exploration with phthalo blue, just because I really love how it mixes with the earth colors, the kind of interesting greens that you can get from it, etc. I'm using the medium Ranson hake brush. And where are we? Right here. There we go. We tilt it on an angle. So medium Ranson hake brush. Going to use this to map out my scene. And if you have any questions or anything you would like to see, let me know in the chat. Just fixing that glare right there. Hey, Hammy. Think we'll eventually go for an interior wooded scene. We'll just start toning the paper. Me and Matthew and Joe were talking the other day about how Ranson and others would utilize the raw sienna to essentially kind of lubricate the paper, just to kind of get things rolling. Here's some light red oxide. Building things up kind of slowly, mainly to give people a chance to ask questions, and for those that want to follow along at a later date. Of course, you're always welcome to follow along with anything that I do. And of course, you're always welcome to sign your name and have my express permission to sell anything you do when you follow along with my paintings. I want you guys to be successful. I want you guys to have fun. And I don't want to keep any art secrets from y'all. I'd like y'all to be able to go out, buy some supplies, and have fun. Speaking of which, since Matthew is in the chat, tell him that we need to get together for a Zoom meeting soon and discuss cheap and easy ways for people to get into watercolor painting. Let's grab some burnt sienna. I don't really play around with that in the sky too much, but just going with the flow and just having fun. Very spontaneous painting. I always refer to it as the tonalist approach. I'm always giving the shout outs to Stuart Davies and Dennis Sheehan, the modern oil tonalist painters. Yep, Matthew, that would be great. Monday and Wednesday, I am tutoring after school until about 3:30 after work. And then after that, I'm free. But yeah, so this spontaneous kind of approach of just building things up, taking a paper towel, wiping back, going back and forth, really nothing planned. Literally the only plan is maybe an interior stream, which we might actually be moving away from. And what else? Maybe using phthalo blue. But that being said, let's grab some ultramarine blue. Throw a little bit in the sky. I was FaceTiming with my mother earlier this morning, and she was talking about how she's been enjoying the skies that I've been painting lately. An artist friend of mine, I'm not going to say any names, was dealing with a little bit of lack of drive to paint, or kind of having a little bit of difficulty painting lately, which might be a good thing to kind of talk about during this painting video. Kind of sometimes when you hit that that funk, that lull in your painting approach, I think every painter goes through that, and I think it's almost a good thing to have happen at times. I think it shows the ebb and flow. It's kind of like how people say you can't have good days without having bad days to compare it to. With a stronger raw sienna, I feel like we have a closer edge being created. Let's grab some of that phthalo blue, just so we can say that we at least used it. Now we're committed. There we go. Mixed with the earth tones, you really get some cool colors. Grab some strong raw sienna for this far side. Down a little bit of that in our water. And I'll use this stronger color, wet and wet in the sky, create a softness for a background for trees. We can grab our light red oxide for that as well. So at the beginning of November, there's the Omelette Festival, where, yeah, Hammy, the Omelette Festival. Hello, how's it going, Mr. Steve? Let's grab some. Oh, Hammy, you can't stick your claws into me, bud. Hammy's trying to hop in my lap. Anyway, beginning of November, there's the Omelette Festival. They have giant omelet that they make with over 500,000 eggs. No, sorry, 5,000 eggs, plus one for every year that the festival has gone on for. Pre-pandemic and festival shutdowns, I had set up and sold at the festival. Grabbing a little bit of black, a little bit of Payne's Gray mixed into this, and did some demos. Did some oil painting demos there. I'm debating if I should sign up for it this year. So if you like the live demos, let me know. And if you all want to see me do a lot of live stuff, let me know. And maybe I'll do that in person for that festival. Personally, for me, oils work better out and about, even though the cleanup is messy. Just simply because of how fast things dry watercolor wise. I think Matthew was talking the other day about how a lot of his plein air painting group will use oils. That's probably one of the benefits of it. Hey, how's it going, MJ? What time is it in Australia right now? Let's throw some background stuff in here. Okay, apparently, so I had forgot on the festival that they ever had, I went to as a little baby. So I'll have to find out what year that was in. I'm assuming that was in 86, 87, that they did that. So it's 9 a.m. in Australia right now. It is 6 p.m. here in Louisiana in the United States. Do a little scraping, a little bit of developing of the scene. It is currently pretty loose and pretty directionless at the moment, this painting. So we'll see what happens. Get a little paper towel lifting will get us in a direction we want to see. We'll even grab the squirrel mop. Oh wow. Yeah, so it seems like a great suggestion whenever you're in an art slump to kind of look for inspiration in museums and other artists. I feel like I'm currently potentially on the edge of an art slump, but I think that's simply just due to the overwhelming nature of being a school teacher and it being the beginning of the school year still. But have you gotten over your slump? So I'm taking a squirrel mop while I'm interacting with the live chat. This is a mixture of ultramarine and the light red oxide, great distant purple. I don't usually apply it in this fashion. I'll usually build up this distant with the hake in the beginning. But it's got to be down for different experiments and trying different approaches. Plus sometimes it's easy to paint so fast that whenever you're doing a live demo, you kind of want to slow things down a little bit, explore things, and chat. So I pulled water out of this area with the paper towel, and I'm going back into it just so that it's not bleeding and fuzzing too much. I do like the diffused effect of wet and wet, but in some situations I'm not. I'm wanting to control it. And since we're playing around with the squirrel mop, let's grab some phthalo blue and mix it with some raw burnt sienna. We'll use that for our darker aspects and build up that idea. Bring that out a little bit, bring down a little bit of reflection. Trying to determine how I want to create this edge. I have a Payne's Gray mix right here. I love putting along the edges of water, so I'll go there. Oh, you're working on it. That's good. I think, Matthew, the solution is me, you, and Joe having an art chat. That's what the solution is. All right, so building up some darks. Just a different painting approach. I don't usually use the squirrel mop. In fact, I at first was never a fan of this kind of round stamping motion that I was getting from them. And then I realized how it could be read and interpreted as certain materials or certain things of nature. And then it started to click. Though Matthew in the chat can name probably some of the more famous contemporary painters that use the nice juicy squirrel mop brushes for their whole painting. Like that fellow whose name has a Z and ends with a V. I can't pronounce it. I think he used a squirrel mop. And all those other fellas and ladies doing all that fast and loose painting, using that as well. Taking the rigger, just going wet and wet. I did scrape in some tree trunks, but they started getting backfilled, so those areas will be a little dark. Here we'll get more of a softer effect. There's a few different ways you can use the rigger in the wet wet. You could wipe it off and use it to pull lines out. You can use it with water to create a cauliflower effect where it'll start pushing things out, or just a mixture of pigment and apply wet and wet. So a few different ways you can go with it. So you see the cauliflower and happening where I put the water in. I personally am not the biggest fan of that effect, but it can be used to a lot of positive ways. In fact, I'll show you right now some fresh water. Let's just splatter it on. Chaotic textures. You can also get similar textures by sprinkling in salt. The salt will kind of dry and I think absorb that water, and you can brush off the salt. I think you can also use rubbing alcohol to a similar effect. And me and Joe have talked about just the hardness of water. I think your water minerals in it that might just naturally cause it within the painting. Yeah, Joseph Z. Does he have any videos out on painting? If he does, watch some of his stuff and reference him a lot more. It was pretty cool. I got a shout out in the comments. I think it was Mr. Robert from the Ranson group on a painting page. So he had commented on my painting video saying good on me for giving a shout out to Alan Owen, which Alan Owen is one of the older living masters of the kind of British European watercolor scene. I think he turned 88 recently, and I will never not give a shout out to Alan Owen and that generation that taught us how to watercolor. To be hip, and to quote today's youth, what game recognizes game? Something like that, I don't know. You can see that we're still wet in the sky here. I like pushing wet and wet paintings for long time periods. I've referenced Stephen Cronin earlier, where he'll go wet and wet, and he'll kind of get an initial lubrication, like I said about Ron Ranson. Same thing with Alan Owen a little bit, and David Usher. But I don't think they really go this far in the wet and wet stage. For me, I do it because I think that I don't have a scene planned, and it really helps me develop something as I go along, and it creates a uniformity for me personally that I enjoy. I'm gonna grab some Payne's Gray while I'm talking about that. About 5 years ago, I was watching a lot of David Usher and Alan Owen, and I super saturate my paper. Sometimes people will take approach of kind of half coating their paper with water, where it's not a complete application, and that lets you get a mixture of a wet and dry brush effects during your application phase, your initial. And that's something that I saw a lot from the two that I mentioned. And I had followed that a lot at one point. I thought it was really interesting and a really beautiful effect. But for me, I think I left a little too much white of the paper all throughout. So probably in earlier videos you would see something like that, or if you were to look through my collection of paintings you'd see that. Or next time you watch David Usher, look for that in his work. I'm not sure if Posey Gaines has videos up, but he's, I think, is pretty quick in the wet and wet stage as well. And these are like 20-minute painting videos that I'm talking about when I'm referencing these gentlemen. And at first, for me, there was a lot of kind of almost like people running marathons with like, oh, let me try to get the times down, or let me just try to get that fast and loose effect. I think the time frame that works for you eventually comes into play. So whatever, if you feel like you're doing fast and loose, but you're taking an hour, that's fine. That's still that fast and loose approach. I kind of stumbling over my words here, but I'm thinking about how I often talk about Alan Owen and how deceptively simple him and David Usher will make their trees. Same thing with Ron Ranson, how deceptively simple it is. And if I was to take a side of a brush and try that same effect, it would look very childish and amateurish. Where for them, whenever you're watching them, there's just that masterful application. Kind of almost relates to the Chinese brush painting, where that one brush stroke can tell a lot. Using paper towel to lift up here. If anybody has any questions or anything they want me to explore in this painting, let me know. I know I didn't make any announcements about going live besides what I posted last minute. Let's steepen this bank. We can bring ourselves a little bit of bigger grouping. We'll play with our phthalo mixtures, phthalo and raw sienna. And we'll bring those colors down below. We haven't played with burnt umber. And honestly, within a painting, there's no need to be like, oh, well, we haven't used this color, we need to use it. But this is just an exploration. The only real kind of underlying goal is, besides painting live, just playing around with the phthalo mixtures, like I said. So here's a little bit of that burnt umber mixed into it. And we'll choke this side off some. Just personally, I like the framing devices on the edges. If this was to be framed and to be underneath a mat, the mat would probably come to about here and to about there. But it's just something that I enjoy personally. Some of the tonalist masters and some of the writings, I believe, I don't think Carlson was considered a tonalist, and I'm not sure if I'm quoting Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting 1920 or Burge Harrison 1909, definitely a tonalist, Burge Harrison. But there's a lot of talk about like the edge of paintings and having less tonal variety on the edge of paintings, where more detail, texture, etc. is on the inside to bring your eye inside the painting, as opposed to having like super detail where's my scraping device? Here we go. If I was to scrape right here like that, we start having a lot of interest literally right along that edge. So it's just something that I personally try to keep in mind. There's people that'll say there's rules in painting or that there's no rules in art. You can go back and forth and debate that. And it might be better just to phrase it as there's formulas that you can follow that will generally lead you towards something that will work out. Whenever I make up these scenes, there's the formulas that I follow of having the soft, lighter tones in the background, then I bring things forward and I get more texture, etc. as I move forward. So it's not a rule, but it's just kind of a formula that I follow to make things work. And then as you paint and as you practice, you'll kind of hear the different rules or formulas that the different painters utilize, or what they kind of latch onto. A rule, formula, use limited number of tubes of pigment. There's no need to use a whole bunch of different tubes. And the reason that is a rule or formula is that you'll get more color harmony regardless of what you use if you use just a very, very limited palette. So it's kind of a little formula for success. A kind of rule formula that Joe Menza gave me once was, whenever you feel like you're not sure what to do, call the painting done. And little things like that. Or we often say there's no need to tickle the painting or to fiddle around with it. Or once you start fiddling, then you're done. And that's a formula that works for people. So this is the Payne's Gray. I have a lamp blackout. I'm going to grab some of that. One of the rules that, or formulas that people have, is to not use black. Reason being is that they feel black will deaden the color and deaden the overall feel of the painting. And you know, it's up to personal preference if you want to have black or not. I don't use it that often, but it is inherently in some mixes. Yeah, the best rule is knowing when to stop, definitely. It's very easy to sit there and overwork. In fact, to the gentlemen that I had talked about earlier, it might have been David Usher or Cronin that will often get to the scraping of rocks or grass in the foreground, and they'll often say knowing when to stop the scraping, and then they'll often say, feel like I overdid the scraping. And that's totally fine. I'm curious, and we'll have to ask Joe. I'm just bringing this foliage out in front a little bit. We'll have to ask Joe about Bob Ross. I know that he would do a painting or two prior to filming the painting, and he had one that he was working from essentially. But I'm curious if Bob Ross was just like, okay, I have this 20 minutes to paint, and that will go like that, or if he had some sort of rule for stopping his wet and wet, fast and loose oil painting. So if anybody knows the answer to that question about Bob Ross, let me know. Or that's something we'll ask the experts on. That being said, with the live videos, there is a lot more tickling and playing around. We haven't paused at all to do any dry offs. The sharper edge at this point, we're wet enough to even pull out whites in these spots. To quote or to reference Bob Ross again, he would use, I think, the palette knife to do these kind of vertical scrapes in the background. It was in like a season 1. I didn't really get far into the seasons of Bob Ross, but he had talked about how it was an easy way to make it look like you had spent hours and weeks upon a painting. Let's grab some raw sienna. The phthalo blue just gives a nice vibe to it. I'm still getting that weird glare in the video, so I apologize for that. Down a little bit of reflection. We'll do a pause in a moment and do a dry off. But I'm layering my foliage in this spot right here. I haven't put a tree branch or a dead tree coming out and over in a while. I'm wondering if, I don't know if I've done that recently, but let's play around with that, explore that before we do a dry off, so we can see how we can create that idea and that effect. So I'm just mixing my colors up. This is the number 4 rigor. We're going to come up and over. Kind of breaks up the scene. Painting with John. No, I have not seen Painting with John. Which one is that, Matt? Is that on YouTube, or was that a series? Let's feed some black, wet and wet, into the underside. The number 4 rigger, well, I'm waiting for Matthew to tell us about Painting with John. I like it just because it holds more pigment. If you have soft hands, which I don't have a light touch, but if you have a light touch, you can really get some thin lines and really play around with it. Maybe we'll do a gouache sun at the end and pull out some whites. I'm going to do a pause. We'll do a dry off. Now is the time before that to see if there's any kind of scraping you want to do. You can re-wet areas after the dry off, but it's just something to keep in mind before we go to this next stage. No, I'm not going to pause. I'm going to turn to mute. All right, so it's a little damp still, but relatively dry. A few things to note. With the dry off, you're going to have a softening take place. If you spend a lot of time in the wet and wet stage, you have less of a softening take place, usually because you have less moisture on your paper at that point when you're doing the dry off, so it's not as much of a removal of moisture and causing that shift. Some people prefer not to use the blow dryer. They'll let it dry naturally. You can push pigment around with the blow dryer, especially if there is super saturation. People like, what's his name? Turner, JMW Turner, would have an assembly line of paintings taking place. So, you know, they didn't have a way of drying that I know of. James Fletcher Watson, in one of his books, he was a painter from Britain or the United Kingdom, and he would talk about how it would get so cold, and he would go into his car and use his heater in the car to dry off his painting between stages. So I think that addresses everything in that the dry off. I haven't watched Painting with John, but excuse me. That's the one on HBO Max where the guy was the trailer. The guy saying that he didn't want to have happy trees; he wanted to have dark trees. Let's grab some raw sienna. Just hitting kind of the upper tree line. Got a little bit of that phthalo blue. Such a strong pigment. I'm not sure if I've ever put a new tube of phthalo blue on my palette. I had one of the tins, like the tubes break, so I just cut it open and put the rest out on the palette, and it's just had this permanent location that always seems to have the same mount. Some sort of weird painting miracle. That's just a really strong pigment. Kind of like the alizarin crimson tubes, where you never seem to finish one of those as well. I'm going to work a little differently in this stage. Try to pull it dark to really accentuate this foreground kind of dead tree branch. Try not to pass exactly over the pre-existing ones, just to get a tonal variety on it, create a sense of depth. I'll give a little life to it. I think this will jump out against that background. Of course, we could take white gouache and mix it with any one of our colors and apply it and get that to jump and pop as well. This is just some raw sienna. Light red oxide always seems so opaque in a watercolor painting, so you can use that as well. Though oddly enough, using it in a single pigment painting, it doesn't have the opacity. I'm going to build up my darks along this side. I'm just putting texture in. Chances are, like I said, if this was to get matted, these spots would never get seen. But it just helps me create the overall scene to it. Make some of the shadows out underneath. We got maybe a little bit of foreground here. Not too much foreground, just a little edge. Been referencing David Usher a lot today, and I would love how we bring out the parts and just go a little above and a little below, so it's just the grass coming up with a little bit hint of reflection coming down. Just little tricks that these older masters that have been doing it for years have, that they can pass on to us. We can learn from them. And I'm curious if we could ever hopefully ask them to do an interview and find out who they pulled those techniques from. In today's day and age, we have our books, we have our internet, we have everything, we have all these resources. Well, David Usher and Alan Owen were during dinosaur times. So whoever heard that, y'all could go tell them that we're giving them little jabs in the rib over here. Let's use the number 1 for a little bit of foreground. This area is darker in person. I'm just getting a light reflection happening, and I'm not quite sure why that's happening. I've moved my light around quite a bit, so. But grabbing some Payne's Gray, just reconstituting some umber, phthalo blue, just kind of mixing it all together just to get it dark. I think this is where some straight from the tube would really would benefit us. Side brush effect, which I think Herman Peckel might have a video or two up. I need to see that. He does these branches and leaves that are kind of right in front of the viewer. I'm curious how he does that, and it's so unique to him. Where it's almost as if you were standing on a cliff of overgrown weeds and bushes and everything, and it's just you're seeing a whole scene through that. And I like that feeling and effect that it gets. So we have a little bit of our texture here. I just realized that it's football season, that football games are starting to get broadcasted, and I chose Sundays as my days to go live. So if at any point you say, I want to go watch some football, feel free. But I'm just hitting me now. And my mother was telling me yesterday how there was an LSU football game. So I was at a farmer's market with some of my paintings, and the market was pretty dead. But she said, I think there's an LSU game. Let's pause the volume to do a dry off. All right, so we did our dry off. Now we're going to do a little bit of just risk taking. And if there's anything else you would like me to explore with on top of this, let me know. But I'm going to take some Dr. P.H. Martin's bleedproof white. I believe I've seen this at Hobby Lobby. I know they sell it on Belek and Jerry's Artarama. This is kind of people's go-to white in watercolor for their pure white aspect. And what I was thinking was, I talked about white gouache reflections, but we're going to take a chance and just come in and go super white with this. It's not for mixing, or at least that's what it says in the bottle. It does feel like it's drying out a little bit, so I might need to mix some distilled water in. Anyway, hopefully it's showing up on the camera. Let's put this pure white wash on. I know it is almost dead center in the painting, but if you don't do these experiments, if I don't do these experiments, we'll kind of never know. I think Joseph Z, you mentioned him earlier, talks about how he apparently has a container of white mixed with water. On his palette, not on his palette, on his art table to experiment with. And you can take these in washes and use it to push some stuff back. But I'm using it just to bring our absolute white. And we have our white marks right there, just a little bit of, a little too brush marky. Oh, that dried quick. There we go. So maybe more of a dry brush effect would be more effective there. But I like that. It's interesting. It's something that if you were to look up into the sky and you were to have kind of cloud trail, that's what it kind of gives the vibe of. So in fact, let's just do a little bit of loose brush strokes with that. And let me know what you think, if you would use it or not. Kind of lets us also push the gambit all the way from the white tonal value to all the way to our darks. But in about a minute, I'll do my last dry off. Just doing some last minute fiddling. So I'm going to wrap things up. If anybody has any questions, comments, let me know in the chat. If you're watching this at a later date, once again, you're always welcome to follow along with anything that I do. You are always welcome to sign your name to anything that you do when you follow along with me. And you have my express permission to sell anything you do whenever you follow along with one of my paintings. I want you guys to be successful and have fun and afford art supplies. If you ever want to support this channel, I have a whole bunch of links below. That goes towards art supplies, more experiments. It's also going to go towards signing up for festivals to be a vendor, because they are super expensive to sign up and sell at. Am I happy with that? want to sign with. A variety of things you can sign with. I've never managed to be able to successfully sign with a brush. I have a Metric that has some platinum carbon ink in it. This is a number one, like a number one width, like 1 millimeter. It is really wide, but the platinum carbon ink kind of seeps into the painting a little bit. So even though it's a big kind of bold mark at first, it does blend in pretty good. All right, let me pause for a dry off, and then we will sign off. All right, and there we go. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a great rest of your Sunday and have a safe and happy and productive week. I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.